Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're going to Succah Daf Mem. We are going to begin on Mem Amud Aleph, about 11 lines from the top, with the word Taimedelula Bar Shishis, Hanichnas L'Shvius. Who? So we were learning in yesterday's Daf, based on the Mishnah, that when you purchase on the Shemitah of the 7th year from an Am Haaretz, the Lulav, purchase the Lulav, but ask him that the esrog should be given to you as a gift. And the reason why is because the difference between a lulav and an esrog, as we said, l'maskana, is that bein l'maiser, bein l'shvius, an esrog would go basal akita, the time that it's actually plucked or taken from the tree. And therefore, even if it's shishis bar shvius, that let's say it grew on the 6th year, but now it's the 7th year, so when it comes to an esrog, since we go basal akita, therefore it's considered to have the din of shemitah. Therefore, when you give the money to the Am Haaretz, which is the Demei Shvius, he may end up holding it and not doing bi'ur, not getting rid of it, which is the requirement on the produce of shemitah. However, when it comes to the lulav, it's not an issue, because we say when it comes to a lulav, we go basal chanata, when it grows. And therefore, since it grew on the 6th year, even though now you're using on the 7th year, it's not an issue. So the Gemara wonders that the only reason why the lulav is not an issue here is time the lulav bar shishis hanichnas l'shvius, is because the lulav, we look at going basar chanata, we say it's after the 6th year. Who? The shminis kadosh. However, if let's say we would fast forward in next year, so the 8th year it's kadosh, because the 7th year, if we go basar chanata, so that was the problem. It's now the 8th year, and therefore that it's considered to be kadosh. So my eitzim ba'almahu l'chayr, we should just say it's like regular wood. The eitzim in behem mishum kedusha shvius. We know that wood doesn't have the capacity to take upon itself the kedusha shvius. Not as we learned, or the sanya, ali kanim v'al gefanim shigevavan l'choyva al pnei asada. So when it comes to these different vines of reeds or grapevines that are stored like as harvest for the fields, lokton lachila. So if you gather them for the purposes of having it eaten, let's say for animal consumption, yesh mishim kedusha shvius, because it's something which is for eating. However, lokton le'etzim, if the whole purpose is to gather just for wood, and mishum kedusha shvius. So the question is, why do we have to say the case is that the 6th year going to the 7th year, which is a diuk, that the 7th year going to 8th year would be a problem for the lulav? What do you mean? It shouldn't be any different than eitzim ba'alma, and eitzim don't take upon itself the kedusha shvius anyway. So Mary says, shani hasim diyomer kol lachem la'achla, lachem dumya de la'achla. So the fact that it says it's yours, it's the issue of the taking something which is for shvius as just like it's l'achla. So this is also doing the l'achla. It's also comparable for your consumption. Says Rashi, Gabi atze hatzaka. When it comes to using it for firewood, shvius. The reason why it doesn't have any kedusha is because the pasuk says v'hoisesh Shabbos, etc. You can use it for anything. Remember, the ein moiser lihana, the ein muter lihana is meper shvius el hana hadum lachila. The only thing that you're not allowed to do is derive hana if it's comparable to eating. So now let's go back in the Gemara. Misha nasu bi roshava. It has to be something in which the pleasure and its destruction is happening at the same time, which has to do with, for example, eating. When you eat something which you're getting hana, you're also doing biur at the same moment, and therefore, since that's what happens, or for that matter, Rashi says sicha, you smear something on you, so you're getting hana and you're using it up, drinking it, as well as hadlakas haner, lighting a candle. All these different things are considered to be they're happening at the same time. Yatsu eitzim, which excludes wood, shanasan acher bi'irun. However, when it comes to wood, as we said, the reason why you're not going to be there's no kedusha shvius is because the hana happens after you burn it. You put it into the fire, says Rashi, mishinaasu gecholim. Only from the time it becomes like coals, that's when you derive hana. That's when it warms you up. But while it's burning, those first few moments, it doesn't cool you off. It's only when it becomes gecholim. And that's the reason why wood has no kedusha shvius. Now we have a very fascinating Rashi of a lulav, ikar hanasai l'chavdes abayis. The purpose of the lulav is actually a broom. That's actually, if you think about it, it's very fascinating. The lulav takes upon itself like the status of a broom. Vu shas be'iro v'kilkuloi. So just like food, while you're sweeping, you're getting hana because you're cleaning your house, and you're also at the same time ruining your broom. It's not nice anymore. It's an old, dusty, dirty broom. So therefore, because of that, the lulav actually takes upon itself the din of kedusha shvius, which again, obviously, is a tremendous drasha that's to be found over here, that the inyan of a lulav has something to do with cleaning. Again, going back to the Arba Minim, has something to do with undoing or cleansing oneself from the original sin of Eitz Hadas. So it's interesting, the broom is what we're taking. We're taking a broom to sweep up our sins, and we take the esrog, which again, some say was the Eitz Hadas. Va'ika eitzim demashchan dahanasan ubiran shava. Who says, well, 1 second, there are some types of wood that what you do is the hana as well as the biur does take place at the same time. As Rashi says, eitz shemen sha'etz atzmo madlikin bo, that the wood itself you light up, loha'ir, to give you light. Davi hanasu biur shava. So maybe we should say, when it comes to those things, they should take upon itself kedusha shvius. So I'm a Rava, so he says, stam eitzim lahasaka hein oindin. He says, no. The truth is, when it comes to most wood, we say that it does not take upon itself kedusha shvius, because most wood is for fire, is to make a fire, and because the consumption, the nechila, ana, doesn't take place at the same time, so it doesn't have kedusha shvius. And therefore, we're going to say the same thing over here. It says Rashi, hilchach l'nakna bahu kedusha shvius mi'ikara yafil loktan l'ha'ir. Even if, let's say, you do gather it up for the sake of lighting it, right, for to give you light, but nonetheless, since most wood does not have that purpose, therefore it's almost like batal daitel etzel kol adam, and therefore it doesn't work, and therefore it doesn't have kedusha shvius. However, the lulav does. Now the Gemara says, "Ve'etzim lahasaka tanahi." This whole concept that eitzim, that wood is primarily used for firewood, is actually a machalkas tanaim, the sanya. Ein meisin perish shvius, you're not allowed to give over perish shvius, lo mishra v'lo l'chvosa, not for soaking flax, and also not for laundering. Rabbi Yossi Omer Moisrin, that you actually could use perish shvius for these purposes. So my Tanakama, why does the Tanakama say that you can't use perish shvius for mishra or klusa? So the fact that it says it's for eating. So the dik is, why does the pasuk say kedusha shvius is l'achla? You can use it only while you to eat it. Is lo mishra v'lo klusa, not for soaking, and again not for laundering, not for some type of detergent. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to use perish shvius for those reasons. So my time to Rabbi, you see. So why the pasuk l'chara says l'achla? So how would he also allow mishra and klusa? So merkra l'chem l'chol sarcheichem v'afil mishra l'chvusa. So the question is, on one hand it says l'chem, which is a riboy, and you have l'achla, which is a miyat. So in Tanakama haksib l'chem. So what does he do with l'chem, which seems to be inclusive? Now hu l'chem dil l'achla, as we said, misha nasa bi'ir shava yatsu mishra v'kvusa shanasan acha bi'iron. The reason why he excludes the mishra and the kvusa, the soaking or using as like a detergent, is because the pleasure that you get is only after it has been destroyed, and therefore that is not one of the things that is permitted to be used for the Peresh Shvius. Rabbi Yossi Haksibul Achla, so how Rabbi Yossi, who seems to be very inclusive, so why is it says Achla, which seems to be exclusive. So Hahuma Boili Lugma says that you have to use it something which is comparable to eating, but not Lugma, which is some type of bandage of sorts. Let me see if Rashi says that Lugma. Rashi Rafua for healing purposes. Okay. If you look in the Rashi before, so like to soak or to wash your clothes with the wine of Shvius. It doesn't happen at the same time. When you soak the garments, or a pishna b'yayin, or the flax, sha'achas nisba'er v'avid loy v'hanasa enu ad sheyilbash begadim. It's not until you wear the clothes when you get the hana. So, however, when it says l'achla, it's come to exclude for the purpose of refuah. Could assign l'achla l'mulugma, which apparently everyone holds l'achla l'mulugma. Maybe it's come to tell you can't even use it for laundering, which is inclusive. So harigul kvusamers ha'mani mekayim l'achla l'mulugma. So my reisel Rabbi says kvus l'haitzis hamulugma. Why? Okay, one's a riba, one's a miyaz. But why is it more mukhrach? Why is it more logical to say that you should exclude mulugma, which is for refuah, but for some reason kvus l'mishra is something which is acceptable? As we continue to mem on the base, what's the logic in Rabbi Yossi who makes that distinction? So Mar ben Yesakvusa, the reason why I'll include the laundering shishabach haladam, because it's something in which pertains to all people. It says Rashi Jakol Srichin La, everyone needs it. Kamo achila, just like eating, everyone needs to eat. It's a basic physiological need. So too when it comes to laundering your clothes. It's only for someone who's sick. Says Rashi, she'ein hakol chaylan, not everyone is sick, Baruch Hashem. So therefore, that's why he says it. If you want, in fact, l'achla is an exclusion. L'achla is something that everyone does. L'achla, excluding things which is like l'ugma, which is not for all people. Man tana l'had tana rabbanon. So who's the tana of the following statement? L'achla v'lo l'ugma. L'achla v'lo l'ziluf. Ziluf is generally we sprinkle on the floor to be able to so the dust should go down. Or Rashi says regarding Ziluf, Yayin shemizalfin babayas l'reach toiv. It says for a good smell. In numerous places, Masechtas Eruvin, it talks about Ziluf to be able to for the dust to go down. Apik tavizin. It's an interesting word, apik tavizin. So Rashi says, Galakia causes a person to basically vomit. And he says that this is actually an abbreviation, it's a nokrikoin for apik tfei zin. That it should come out when there's a lot of extra muzzle, a lot of food. So when a person has too much food, so it causes you to basically vomit. So again, this is something which is not l'chol adam. So come on, Rabbi Yossi. So this is like Rabbi Yossi. The fact that it mentions these three things, which are not sham l'chol adam, so it must be only like Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi says that you could do kvusa in Mishra. However, the Rabbanan don't allow those things either, so obviously it's only like Rabbi Yossi, because the Rabbanan would have a more of an inclusive list. Question 13. Lachem l'achla. Lachem dumid l'achla. Ma neser lasos b'per shvius. What's also to use with per shvius? Because it's not comparable to eating. What's not considered comparable? So according to one Mandiyam and Tanakama, Mishra Kvusa, because the Hana takes place after the Biur. And the other Mandiyam, Rabbi Yossi, says it's coming to exclude Malugma, which is not Shavah Chaladam, unlike food, which is Shavah Chaladam. Weiter. Rabbi Lezer. So Rabbi Lezer says, in Shvius Mischaleles El Derech Mekach. The only way that you can cause the Kedusha to be transferred from one thing to the next is only if it was done Derech Mekach, through a purchase, through a sale. That's the only way it'll work. Rabbi Yochanan Omer bein derech mekach, bein derech chilul. So it could work not only through a normal mekach, a normal monetary exchange, as Rashi says, lidfais dameha b'kedushasa, that the money takes upon itself, and that was the whole problem, because the Am Haaretz has the pair of shvius, and now all of a sudden you have the esrog, but it causes this transaction causes it to now go onto the money, and now the Am Haaretz has this money which has kedusha shvius. So the question is that derech mekach, says Rashi, shemachur zelachaver, you sold it, lo ayde chilul, not just through chilul, loimer hari peres halolu muchulolim al peres halolu, like through his decoration, saying that yes, I want this kedusha to be transferred onto the next. No, according to Rabbi Yochanan, no bein derech mekach bein derech chilul. Even a person who would say the decoration that I want these fruits to be mechal onto these monies, that would also work. So my time Rabbi Lezer, why did Rabbi Lezer say it's dafke derech mekach, that the kedusha is transferred to the money? Dechsiv b'shnasa yovel hazois. It talks about yovel, the samach le v'chisimchur memcher. And it talks about mechir of selling, which is derech mekach, lo derech chilul. The pasuk specifically talks about a sale, and therefore it must be selling as dafka derech mekach and not any other way. Rabbi Yochanan my taima. So why does Rabbi Yochanan say that even derech chilul works? The pasuk also says ki yovel hi kadosh, ma kadosh bein derech mekach bein derech chilul, ashvius bein derech mekach bein derech chilul. We know when it comes to the dinim of that which is hektish, a person does have the ability to be able to verbally make this declaration, and by doing so, it is mischalel onto money. So too, when it comes to shvius, pair of shvius, it should be able to do the same thing. Now again, the problem is you have these psukim which seem to be saying the opposite things. So Rav Yochanan, according to Rav Yochanan, who says that it's even derech chilul, so hai ki simchur memchar ma yavedle. Why does the pasuk talk about selling, which that sounds like only derech mekach will it work, no other way? So he says, no, meboiling Rav Yosi Bar Chanina. It's come to teach us a completely separate and fascinating din. The Sanya. Rav Yosi Bar Chanina. Boyre, come and see kamakasha vakashal shvius. How serious it is, a person who engages in even like a vak lashon hara, something which is like not the actual lashon hara, but it's still wrong. So also the avak, the dust of shvius, even that is something where a person will end up getting a severe punishment. How do we see this? Adam naisam beper shvius, a person who engages in transactions as he shouldn't do with the peros on the Shemitah year. The fact there's a smichas aparshis, the juxtaposition, as we're going to see now, he'll end up having to sell all of his movable items. A person will return to his possessions. So that pasuk is coming to tell you that things that are being sold to your neighbor, which is mataltal, and basically it's saying that if you're engaged in the sales and transactions of shvius, so you're going to end up memcher, you're going to have to sell and lose basically all of your possessions. You have to sell your possessions. But it doesn't mean that the only way that kedusha is transferred is derech mekach. No, it's even derech chilul. Rabbi Lezer haikra Rabbi Yochanan ma yavedle. So according to Rabbi Lezer, what does he do with his pasuk? Ki yovel hi kaidish, ma kaidish taifeses dama, ashvius taifeses es dameha. So he learns it out. Even though Rabbi Lezer says no, that when it comes to shvius it's only mechal derech mekach. Well, don't we compare it to kodesh? So when it comes to hektish, when a person does this transfer, it's taifeses dama. The kedusha still remains, right? It takes upon itself that kedusha. So too shvius is taifeses es dameha. So too, the money will take upon itself this new kedusha. So this is coming to tell us this basic din. Says Rashi, pedia. There's a concept of redemption. Sibbe shizeh yoytzev zeh nechnas. One comes out and goes in. Tachtav yoytzev hektish l'chulin. Then nechnasan hadamim tachtav. Dahainu upada. Dahainu nimcha. Okay. So basically, it's just telling you that there's this concept that the money, the kedusha could be transferred, but it doesn't tell you that you can do it just through declaration. Derech chilul, no, you actually have to do it derech mekach, through an actual transaction. Otherwise, it will not work. Fine. Tani Gavas Rabbi Lezer, Tani Gavas Rabbi Yochanan. We're now going to show support to both these opinions. So first of all, Tani Gavas Rabbi Lezer. Now how do we see, like the sheet of Rabbi Lezer, that the only time Shvius works is Dafka Derech Mekach? It's pretty clear based on this brisa. Shvius Teifesas as Damela. First of all, Shemitah, as we said, you could redeem, the Kedusha could go onto money. Shnemer ki yovel hi kodesh tielachem, ma kodesh teifes as dama v'aser, that you can be teifes, it's money, now all of a sudden the money becomes forbidden from any other benefit because it takes upon itself Kedusha Shvius. Shvius teifes as dama hevi asura. So if that's the case, if we're comparing to Hektish, so ma kodesh teifes as dama v'yetzel chulin, we know that when it comes to Hektish, it's transferred the Kedusha to the money. Now that original item is mamish totally chulin, so Shvius tefesas is dameh v'yotzes chulin. So also now the original Paros also is chulin. Talmud learner tihiyeh dev'yasetaha, which means that even though the Kedusha goes onto the money, still it retains its original Kedusha as well. So haketzad. So how does that take place? And we're now going to see the word is lokach, which shows, again, it's derech mekach. Lokach beperish shvius basar, a person purchased for the money of shvius, they bought meat. So elu ve'elu misbarim b'shvius. Both of them have the kedusha shvius, they both must be consumed on that year. So that's what happens. The original transfer, the kedusha does go onto the second item, but the first one remains kadosh. However, now, once it's transferred again to the next level, then that kedusha does leave that other item. And all of a sudden, now the yayin has the kedusha. If you purchase for yayin shemen, shemen. The yayin no longer has the kedusha, the oil does. So haketzad. So achron nichnas b'shvius. The last item takes upon itself, it's transferred over the Kedusha Shvius. The Pri-Atzma Asar. However, the original fruit is Asar. So it's interesting, going back to our Mishnah, when a person buys the fruit, the Esrog from the Amaretz, the truth is, you also are now holding on to something which has Kedusha Shvius, according to this. The Demei Peros also has Kedusha Shvius. However, maybe you could almost think that you could somehow, if you think about how to do this, you can get that money back from him. So now all of a sudden the money will be transferred back to you again on a third item. Perhaps that's another way around it. But what do we see from here? It's very clear, like the Shita of Rabbi Lezer. Why does it keep using that language? Perhaps it's because it's telling you that's the only way that the Kedusha is transferred onto the money. It's only if it was there in derech mekach, but not derech chilul through this verbal decoration. Tani kavas Rabbi Yochanan, echad shvius, the echad meiser sheni. When it comes to shmita or meiser sheni, which we know also if it's too heavy for you to bring it, all this fruit, 10% of your produce could be hundreds of thousands of tons, so you can redeem it onto the money. So there's a concept of redemption. So it says here, mischalulin al behem achayev of, you could be mischalel, which doesn't mention mekach. There's not necessarily do you have to do a transaction, but even a verbal declaration. And it doesn't just say this by Meiser Sheni, it also says this by Shvius. This is a raya that it could even be done this way. And what could you transfer it onto? Al behem achayev of, on different animals, bin chayin bin shchutin. Meir. You could transfer it onto any animal if it's alive and if it's not alive anymore. You can only put the kedusha onto shechted animals. Al chayin in mischalin. Well, what's the problem with living animals? Because the problem is you may end up waiting until it produces a child, then you may forget that it has kedusha altogether. And therefore, because of that, it's, as the Gemara says in Succah Pesachim, there's an issue of takala. There's a calamity that could take place in this situation. And because of that, we don't want you to use a living animal. But a shechted animal, we're not concerned that you're going to end up using. Amar Rava, machlokes b'schar, as we continue to mem aleph amud aleph, the whole machlokes, as we mentioned over here, is only when it comes to male animals, says Rashi, she'en megalim mehen v'lados, because obviously they're not able to produce offspring, they're not able to give birth. And Rashi says, "V'fil hachi gazer rabbanon atu nekevis." Maybe the Rabbanon will say, no, you can't even use a living male animal because you'll end up using a female living animal, and you may end up keeping it. Because we're concerned that you may end up keeping it, and therefore, because of that, we don't want you to redeem it onto living animals. So what's the point of this? We're going to stop here. This is a raya. According to him, it says mischalin, which is mashma. It's not just derech mekach. It could also be applicable derech chilul. And we'll discuss more about this on tomorrow's daf. Let's see a couple of questions. Question 14. Ki yovel hi kodesh man nilman mehekish shvius v'kodesh. So what do we learn out? Two things. Either pashit, that it's teifesas damel. There's a concept of being able to redeem things, and the kedusha is transferable. And the other pshat is, according to the Man Diarmin, is chalelas bein derech mekach bein derech chilul. It's coming to tell you that just like kodesh works derech chilul, so too, also when it comes to shvius, it can be done the derech chilul. TA 20. Ha'im moisrin pero shvius l'kvusa o l'mulugma? Good question. So we said kvusa is actually a machlokus. L'mulugma divri hakoil, everyone says no. Let's see if he writes why. L'kvusa habi plukta tanoi. Rabbi Yosef Rabbanan nishari kishahanasan acha bi'iran, because the hana takes place after it was destroyed. Mulugma divri l'kol yalma ein ma'isrin dein shava l'chol nefesh. Question TB 21. We will see that on tomorrow's daf. Adkan.